Millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people.
You cannot shake hands with a clenched fist.
Produced by a nuclear exchange would be carried by wind and water and soil and seed to the far corners of
the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
We're not saying that planet Earth is coming to an end. We're saying that planet Earth is about to be refurbished, spaded under, and have another chance to serve as a garden for another civilization.
Most of the people in here are just your reflections. They're your mistakes.
1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
1 million of the planet's 8 million species are threatened.
You are what you repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence ought to be a habit, not an act.
Your lives and the credibility of the United Nations is at stake.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
The reason this is such an interesting time is not only because we're on the threshold of the end of this civilization.
They're trying to take you out with bullshit.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis.
To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
In the language of the U.S. Department of Defense, these are unidentified aerial phenomena.
Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone.
This is the Garden of Doom.
Welcome everyone into Garden of Doom, and this week our guest is R.N. Vooght, and Mr. Vooght is he's an author and a thinker. He's actually on the Graham Hancock site, so that we're going to talk about that a little bit, of course. But his most recent book is called Spirit in the Sky, and I'm going to it's Rick. I'm going to let Rick talk mostly about himself and introduce himself, and then we'll get straight into his philosophies, his beliefs, and his book. So welcome, Rick. Mr. Vooght, thank you for joining us in the Garden of Doom. We're happy to have you.
Yeah, it's happy to be here, and thank you so much. It's always a delight and a pleasure to receive an invitation. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you for accepting. If anyone hears anything, I just raised my speaker, so sorry about that. I should have done that before. Not a professional, folks. So introduce yourself. Tell the folks what you do, what your areas of concentration or research are, and yeah.
Sure. Who am I? What do I do? Basically, I'm a researcher and a writer of ancient cosmologies, psychedelic compounds, predominantly that we're actually starting to find within the human body, which is kind of crazy. I'm not an archaeologist, I'm not a biologist, nor an astrophysicist, just a curious-minded individual looking for some of the answers to some of life's biggest questions. With a fundamental and underlying understanding of the nature of reality, which appears to kind of have been acknowledged by a long-lost, I guess, Graham Hancock-esque civilization, lost to the chronology of the human narrative, really. My research, as we talked very briefly just before we hit the record button, my research has found the backing of the likes of Graham Hancock in recent years, which I'm extremely proud of.
Yeah.
And it's through the likes of researchers such as Hancock himself, Randall Carlson, Laird Scranton, and Dr. Rick Strassman predominantly, which got me into the realm of psychedelia and this otherworldly anomaly we know as DMT. And I believe that I've tied together a number of loose threads regarding these otherwise independent researchers, which it almost somewhat unifies some of the answers to their research and the nature of human consciousness.
So that's all.
That's all, yeah. I mean, it's a bold statement, but one that I'd like to stand by. I think I can go quite a long way towards proving it, proving that someone somewhere in time essentially worked some of this stuff out for us and have more or less inserted the profundity of it into a series of ancient allegories and mythologies which could one day be understood by a scientifically savvy society, being ourselves, for the benefit of future generations of humanity.
Excellent. So I'm going to back up a little bit for the audience. One is to correct myself, because for those of you who listen to the Inhuman reunion show with Bobby Blades and Bobby Anthem, I was talking about sacred geometry, and I credited a YouTube video of about 2 hours to Graham Hancock. Easy mistake, because whenever you have you think about these things, Graham Hancock is one of the giants of it. But that video, while I'm sure Mr. Hancock probably would endorse it and probably has similar things, the actual video I was talking about is actually attributed to someone else you mentioned, Randall Carlson. So I apologize to both men. I apologize to the audience. So if you were looking for a YouTube video of Graham Hancock and sacred geometry and couldn't find a 2-hour one, that's on me. It's actually Randall Carlson's. Well worth your time. It's really quite interesting. So enough about that. The other thing is, for anyone who is listening to the show for the first time, or just listen to some of the history episodes or pop culture one, and you're tuning in, Graham Hancock is sort of a giant in this world, but basically his premise is that there was or were ancient civilizations, human civilizations lost to man, that were technologically, scientifically, mathematically, cosmologically advanced, and some of the knowledge of the ancients was provided by these or descended down, inherited by some of the civilizations that we know, possibly some of the ones of myth and legend, and a bunch of it probably has been lost, to be rediscovered. But there's sort of like people believe in ancient aliens or divinity. Graham Hancock's more of an ancient civilization that we've sort of been unable to definitively prove yet, which, by the way, is not a mutually exclusive idea from ancient aliens and or divinity. So all these things are false choices as far as I'm concerned, but you can pick and choose. Anyway, with that, I assume most listeners of the show are familiar with who Graham Hancock is. Sorry to interject there. Please continue with your exposition, sir.
Not so.
What's DMT? You said DMT. I'm wondering what those initials stand for.
Okay, N,N-dimethyltryptamine is a psychedelic, extremely potent and extremely highly illicit psychedelic chemical compound, if not one of the world's almost foremost psychedelic entheogen compound. Entheogen meaning raising the divinity or God within. And DMT, we find, actually permeates the natural world. It's found throughout the animal kingdom. It's found in abundance through plant life, the plant kingdom. And the anomaly lies in that it's actually contained in the human body, and nobody really knows why, or indeed how. I mean, there's a lot of people that have, going back to Rick Strassman's the spirit molecule research, he had actually hypothesized that the pineal gland may be somewhat guilty of producing DMT within the human brain, something which science hasn't confirmed or negated. There's a lot of ongoing research into where the biosynthesis of DMT within the human body actually takes place. Although we do now know that it's not just within the human brain, it's also, as science backs up now, we know that it's in the human eyes, the human lungs, and the cerebral spinal fluid.
Wow.
And to find that it's even in the lungs as well, I think it might have been Dennis McKenna, Terence McKenna's brother, who actually went as far as saying that realistically, if DMT is found and contained within the human lungs, breathing is essentially a psychedelic experience. And it could go, well, we're trying to prove and find out exactly what it is, other than an entheogenic compound within the human brain. Nobody really knows. And it's a crazy anomaly.
Do we know where in the brain it is? Is it like the medulla, which handles the involuntary aspects, like breathing, if I'm remembering the parts of the brain correctly?
Possibly, quite possibly. There's a couple of, and I can't recall them off the top of my head, but there's a couple of enzymes found within the human brain and the endocrine system of the brain, and I think science has now confirmed that it's saying that it's actually within the hippocampus of the brain as well, which ties to my latest research as well.
Wow. What about synovial fluids? Because you said the spinal fluid, which is, it's called menin something because that's why they call it meningitis. I'm particularly interested in the synovial fluids because I have rheumatoid arthritis. So, of course, my synovial fluids are, my body's sort of at war with my own synovial fluids constantly, which is my excuse for napping. But that aside, I think that the fluids are essentially the same. I'm not a doctor, obviously, I have a doctor, but it's not in medical. So I could be completely wrong about that. But if it's in the the meninges, I'm gonna use that word, right or wrong. If that's related to the synovial fluids, if this compound isn't running all throughout my body, all of our bodies.
And who knows? Again, who knows? There's a thought process that talks about it rising from the base of the spine in a kundalini-like motion past the brain, blood-brain barrier via the pineal, with regards to enlightenment experiences and divinity therein, which can be achieved apparently through meditation, which the Bible tends to point us towards, let's say, for want of a better description. The Bible itself was, I'm not a religious person, I'm not a religious man, but prior to writing The Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods, and around the world we find them, I actually had a very childish, I guess, outlook upon ancient scripture and Christianity and the Bible. I just thought it was I thought it was throwaway material that was basically backdated to an epoch forgotten that didn't really have too much in common with the world at large today in the 21st century. It was only kind of, it sounds terrible of me, but fit for people that maybe didn't have a lot in life, a lot going on, and was kind of somewhat brainwashed by a religious outlook that was kind of outdated. But through my research, and especially for a gentleman, I don't know if you're aware or familiar with a gentleman, an ex-pastor by the name of Bill Donahue. He has basically demolished that wall that I'd kind of built with regards to religion and the proverbial good book, let's say. And there's a lot within the good book with regards to just how to be a nice human being, which, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's absolutely fantastic, absolutely wonderful. But what I've learned through the research of Bill Donahue is that my original outlook couldn't have been any further from the truth whatsoever. It actually turns out that the more we look into it with regards to a scientific outlook in the 21st century, that the Bible itself appears to be somewhat of a blueprint of the biomechanics of the human brain and possibly beyond, which it blows my mind thinking about it now. It really does. I guess I was kind of closed-minded and tiny-minded at first, kind of building that wall and saying, no, thank you very much.
Lots of us are guilty of that. And can you expand on that, the thought process that the Bible is sort of like a blueprint or architectural drawing of the human mind?
The human mind at large and the cosmos as well, with regards to the cycles of the sun. A lot of it with regards to the cosmos, with an as above, so below thesis or outlook. The Son of God may well be transcribed as the sun itself, because realistically, the majority 90%, I would say, of the information contained within the Bible is extremely explicit in being allegorical and metaphorical. And if you don't know how to read between the proverbial lines of the parables, you're going to think that people can, let's say, walk on water and will resurrect after 3 days in a cave after being crucified, let's say. But a lot of this actually turns out to play out across the cosmos with regards to cycles of the sun, albeit the 21st of December through to the 25th of December. Excuse me, the 21st to the 25th, you've got 3 days in between whereby the sun will literally sit still, hence the summer solstice. And it will then, there's kind of an allusion towards death whereby let's say the annual crop cycles are dying over the cycles of the season, but then 3 days after the sun actually sits still from the solstice, it then resurrects, whereby the days become lighter, let's say.
That's interesting, because that sort of explains why Christmas is December 25th, or one of the reasons. When anybody who follows it, I think, generally historians place the date of Jesus' birth, if in fact he's a real historical figure, more around April or spring. It's more around Easter time. And also, I believe the story of Mithras, the origin story, the birth story of Mithras is identical. It's also, well, not identical, but very similar, but also December 25th. Though I doubt it was called December back then. But yeah, so that explains why, why that, whether it started with Mithras 2,000 years earlier, 15 years earlier, why it kept up, why it pervaded. That's interesting.
Well, I think a lot of this can actually be, has been inherited and keeps being re-inherited, let's say, and rewritten with regards to different cultures in different epochs of humanity, let's say. And whereby we have 12 signs of the zodiac playing out across the cosmos. We also find that Jesus has 12 disciples.
Yeah.
And with regards to how that plays out from the cosmos as above, so below with regards to brain mechanics as well, we also find that the human brain actually has 12 nerves.
And also, didn't in Greek mythology there was always 12 major gods, and then if one went away, it was replaced with another. There was always like a council of 12, so to speak.
There we go. Exactly. Which again plays into the brain mechanics of things as well. And just digressing again as well, in regards to the good book's prime message being God is light. If we actually look at the Bible and God's abode and God being looked after, let's say, or protected, let's say, by the cherubim. I don't know how familiar you are with regards to, the cherubim were known as God's messengers.
Mm-hmm.
And within the human brain, we find the cerebrum, which is directly the etymology of which actually comes from. Let me get this right. Getting all tongue tied.
It's okay.
The etymology of cherubim and cerebrum actually dates back to around the same time that the Bible would have in fact been. What I'm saying is it's not a 21st century kind of, there's a coincidence, if you know what I mean.
Right. It would have been maybe Seleucid Greek, would have been the...
We actually find out that God's abode is between the wings of the cherubim. Now, if you actually dissect the human brain, the cerebrum itself actually look like the wings of a cherubim, which is extremely profound in itself. And science...
Not the part with the ram on one side, the lion on one side. Not that version.
Sure.
Oh, yeah?
Sure. Well, we can go into the ram connotations a little bit later as well. The ram connotations go back to ancient Egypt, because you have Jesus as the Lamb of God, and the solar deity of ancient Egypt was Amun-Ra, who was known, as the Ram of God. And his sign was the pyramid, and he was synonymous with light as well.
Yeah, at some point in the show, in Garden of Doom, I think I'm going to get into certain animals and just do an entire show dedicated, like one to the ram, one to the snake, one to the crocodile, one to the eagle, the jackal, and the wolf / coyote, all these, the bull, all these animals that play major parts across all sorts of cultures and just what they're associated with. Actually, I just came up with that idea right now, which I'm very happy with myself for doing so.
Well, when we're told as well that the likes of the Bible's primary message is that, again, God is light, and we have cherubim, which are known as God's messengers. If we actually sort of dissect that, I should say, with modern science describes photons of light as messenger particles as well, which is extremely significant. And yeah, basically, the way they interact with the human brain, they actually enter the Earth's atmosphere on an inclined angle or angel. Which cause, and when they impact the human brain, they actually cause an arc of minute electric stimulus, which enables us to use the supercomputer between our ears, which is basically God's abode. And we're also told that God does reside inside us. And that said as well, it was through another researcher, Brad Clausen, I think it might have been, who actually brought it to my attention that the crucified Christ as well actually looks extremely familiar, holds a lot of commonalities with the human brainstem itself. It actually almost beggars belief.
It's amazing because these are related probably in the only loosest sense, but in the early days of studying the brain, in the modern early days, I'll just call them scientists, thought they could track different parts of the brain, and they came up with things like homunculus and monkeyunculus, because they could track like the shape, almost like constellations in the brain, and sort of associate that with certain types of personalities and gender and stuff like that. It almost sounds like that, except this sounds more based in reality rather than you can take points and sort of do whatever you want with them, I suppose. I mean, the constellations sort of are which is amazing that there's some sort of universal acceptance of the shapes of stars, and we can all see them in a certain way to make the agreed upon shapes. And by the way, for those folks who are talking, there's far more than those 12 constellations. It's just those constellations. They follow they follow the equator, and so those are the ones that, that we use, we use. And as a cheap plug for a future episode, I actually have the Dr. Reverend David Parry book probably coming on in October. And he's going to discuss the different types of angels and their rankings or choirs, however you want to put it. Well, however he's going to put it. So yes, I am familiar with the cherubim, but I also am familiar with the seraphim and the malachim, and I'm not exactly sure what the difference is, because different people think different things. I had an author on who, made a pretty compelling case that they weren't beings at all; they were actually vehicles. So there's all sorts of stuff out there. And that was, by the way, if anyone's interested, that show is called UFOs in the Bible, which is the title is the same as the book UFOs in the Bible by Ken Wadsworth. So I want to go back a little bit to the plants, because we hear about certain plants, and one author, he posited that the red apple in the Eden story wasn't actually an apple. It was a type of mushroom. So we know that there's sort of mushrooms that have, spiritual psychedelic properties. Obviously we've all heard of peyote. Ayahuasca is sort of the natural hallucinogen that people talk about a lot now. I never heard about it 20 years ago. Now all of a sudden I can't turn the corner without bumping into someone talking about ayahuasca. So are these some of the plants that you're talking about?
Indeed. Ayahuasca, especially, or at least the chemical compound component of it, the DMT therein. There's a lot I'd love to elaborate on. Maybe we'll do another show further down the line. I'm actually tiptoeing towards publishing my next book as well, which I don't want to give too much of a game away. Sure. With regards to these mythological trees of life, let's say, I think to talk about that proverbial hymn sheet again with regards to humankind, and it doesn't matter what culture, what epoch you're talking about.
Open invitation to you, sir, to talk about that or anything else you're interested in.
Well, no, DMT, let's say, I mean, I was always interested in the lost civilization kind of thesis, which has been championed by Graham Hancock in recent years. But it wasn't, I mean, I always wanted to I guess, add to the current bibliography, I guess, regarding a supposed lost civilization, but I didn't want to tread on anyone's toes, let's say. I wanted to actually have a piece of the puzzle myself and bring something fresh to the table. Mm-hmm. Now, DMT was never on my radar. I tried a number of psychedelic compounds in my youth. Hadn't for quite some time, let's say 20 years even. When DMT hit my radar, it absolutely blew me away. It absolutely blew me away because the compound structure of DMT, I believed through, and we'll get to the crux of my hypothesis with this as well. Rick Strassman, as I said, hypothesized that DMT could possibly be secreted via the pineal gland within the human brain during birth and death states within the human experience, i.e. a porthole into consensus reality and a doorway out of or into the next life, whether that's reincarnation, a waiting room for the birth of souls, I've heard it called before. I had absolutely no idea, and it blew my mind, to find out that this extractable chemical compound that permeates the natural world actually biosynthesizes in the human brain. And not only did people that had the DMT experience not have the vocabulary, I guess, I certainly don't have the vocabulary to describe what a breakthrough DMT experience is like, having been there myself. Although I would stand shoulder to shoulder with probably 99% of DMT breakthrough experience practitioners, that the DMT experience, when you actually, let's say, air quotes, come back from the experience, you feel somewhat out of sorts in this, I guess, sweaty, clammy, proverbial meat suit we call our bodies, whereby the, for want of better terminology, the interdimensional realm that I just inhabited, that seemed inhabited as well by highly powerful, overly familiar entities, godlike entities that almost were giving you the keys and the nuts and bolts to the nature of reality. That particular reality that they were showing me felt realer than consensus reality that we're actually having this conversation in right now. And that still blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind. It's so hard to verbalize a DMT experience. Wow. for somebody that even has a number of I don't know, psychedelic experiences under their belt. I mean, I thought I was ready, you know. I'd read all the I'd read all the reviews, and I thought, man, this is I've got to see this. What's it all about? But nothing, absolutely nothing, could prepare me for the threshold that I stepped into and then burst straight back out of, because I genuinely thought that on my third hit of freebase DMT, that the wheels in my lifetime had completely fallen off, and that my girlfriend at the time was going to come home with my son and find me dead on the balcony. I thought I was dying. I genuinely thought, oh shit, you've done it. You've gone too far this time, Rick. That's it. You're not coming back from this. But the profundity of my experience when I actually came back from the so-called DMT dome, the DMT realm, it's, again, I still don't think there's vocabulary to actually verbalize the experience. And for all intended purposes, I felt like I was one with the universe. I understood the nature of reality. Again, I thought I'd died, but now I'm back from, I guess, my DMT experiences. I was never scared of dying, let's say, but I always believed that as soon as my number was up in this lifetime, that was it. It was kind of fade to black, nothing more. You've had a good innings. It's just a bag of bones you're buried, and that's it. And it's like it's the same with the Bible mindset that I had. It completely blew everything I thought out of the water. You know, as far as I'm concerned now, I felt like, for want of a better description, like I went home, and I genuinely believe that when my time is up in this lifetime, that I'll be going back there. I'll be going back there, whether I'm reborn into whatever. I mean, who knows? It's all hearsay. I understand that. But what I don't understand is, the entire profundity of the DMT experience. I'm chomping at the bit and want to say so much, but like I said a minute ago, it's absolutely impossible to verbalize. It really is impossible to verbalize.
Okay, well, we can. I mean, if it's impossible to verbalize, is probably no point in trying to explain it. It sounds like something one has to experience for themselves, but it was obviously brain altering and spiritually altering, and open your eyes and you sort of felt a download of understanding, which, by the way, is not dissimilar from lots of people who I've spoken to, a few on the show, about that, who I think they call themselves sensitives. Whether you call it a psychic or a shaman or a witch or Wicca or whatever. We've had Maya Christine on here, who has a relationship with a luminary named Thoth. She's not confirmed that it's Thoth Osiris, because he's never confirmed that it's Thoth Osiris, who's a major figure. Also MG Stevens, who we've actually had on twice, but because as of the date of recording this show, which is May 8th, Mother's Day, happy Mother's Day, everyone. And happy birthday to my father yesterday, 81, so not bad there. Still kicking, more energy than me. But we have a second show with MG, booted to drop soon as well, and she talks about that as well again. But I've heard this kind of thing before, and just because you don't have the words doesn't mean. I think people are gathering the sort of the largesse of it, of how the experience changed you. All I would say is from, Cliff Dunning's been on the show. I listen to Earth Ancients quite a bit. He's got a second show called Destiny. All I'd suggest is don't try it on your own. I think it's something that you have to work up to, and you have to have someone with guide, who can walk you through it and maybe be there to make sure you do things safely. We're certainly not endorsing any experimentation or whatever, but if you want to, make sure you do it with somebody who knows what they're doing.
Have a wingman, most definitely, because I had no one to hold my hand when I genuinely thought. I mean, I was clinging to the tile work and the framework of my balcony, thinking, "Oh my God, that's it. My consciousness is slipping backwards through my soul. I'm dying." But having seen other people go through the experience, they were looking around and just seeing people like myself in the room, not concerned, everything's okay, everything's fine, but without that calming wingman, it's nerve-wracking, nerve-shredding. It's horrific. It wasn't a nice experience, let's say, on the outset, but what I gleaned from it thereon after changed my entire outlook on an existence and consensus reality, really. But yeah, going back to the chip that I wanted to play, or the puzzle piece I wanted to kind of play with regarding to writing a book, and adding to the plethora of authors regarding a lost and technologically evolved. And technological doesn't mean aeroplanes, computers, laptops, phones. I mean, yeah, it's a button is a piece of technology, you know.
Recording stopped.
All right, folks. Rick was about to talk about some of the. He was pivoting from the psychedelic experiences into some of the other areas. The reason why there's sort of this, maybe you're hearing something repetitive, is that I had to switch from Zoom to Skype for reasons that will go undisclosed. But for those in the audience, you're not going to hear a welcome back. But Rick, welcome back.
It's a pleasure to come back.
Terrific.
It's a pleasure that you want to be back.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that would be a unique way of like ghosting a guest. It's like, my Zoom's not working, disconnect, and then I disappear. Yeah, no, nothing like that. So yeah, I think you were going to move off of that, and you were going to start to get into basically your thesis of Spirit in the Sky.
Indeed, and thank you. So it was after watching the Spirit Molecule, which I highly recommend if your listeners haven't viewed it. You can find it anywhere online, the likes of YouTube, and it's presented by Joe Rogan, believe it or not, as well. Okay. It's come a long way since producing that, I know. But yeah, after having my mind blown with the, I guess, interdimensional potential realities of this otherworldly phenomenon, DMT, something that again was never on my radar prior to bumping into that particular documentary. I had no idea what DMT looked like, albeit the molecular structure of DMT. But once I saw it, it felt like I'd been hit by a ton of bricks, a sledgehammer. I knew that I'd seen it before, and I was racking my brains, absolutely racking my brains, thinking, damn, this is so familiar to me, and it shouldn't be. Why is it? Why have I seen this somewhere before? And the image wouldn't leave my mind, and I basically disappeared down to the beach just to kind of clear my mind, let's say, from the significance of the information that I just received from the likes of Rogan and Strassman regarding this entheogenic chemical compound. Yeah,
you're in the UK. What you have beaches?
Yeah, not the white sandy beaches that you guys might be used to. We've actually got a pebble and shingle beach down here, so it's not that comfortable.
I'm in Maryland. We have the same crap. It's pebble beaches for the most part, except in Ocean City where they brought in all sorts of real sand. But yeah.
So yeah, I made myself semi-comfortable on the stones of the beach, thinking, damn, where on earth have I seen this structure before? It's driving me crazy. And almost like an epiphany, the clouds literally parted in the sky above me, and staring back at me, it was, I mean, you can't even write this stuff. The timing of it was beautiful. I was staring at Orion, and my mind just fireworked off in 1,000 different directions, thinking, no, it can't be. It can't be that obvious. It can't hold that many potential commonalities with the molecular structure of DMT. But it was there. It was right in front of me. And the thing that hit me like a ton of bricks was due to my research regarding ancient civilizations, I knew the myth of Osiris, and the myth of Osiris just slapped me in the face. And everything went from a scrambled mess in my mind just to making almost perfect sense, you know? So I guess we should get into the mythology of the ancient Egyptian god of resurrection, Osiris.
All for that. I was going to actually ask you about that, but it seems to me almost it's funny because the sacred geometry is also the scientific and mathematical geometry of nature, and they say that we are stardust, we are connected to the universe, and it sounds like where you're going is that this is the proof of that. That sacred geometry, that stardust, that star stuff that we're all made of. It may be this DMT molecule. I don't want to steal your thunder, but I'm really glad that you're going to do the myth of Osiris, because I'd love to hear it again from your viewpoint. And I also want to hear if you know why Osiris has always been tied to Orion, because it seems like something that is almost prehistoric.
Yeah. And I genuinely believe that it predates ancient dynastic Egypt. I think that this is probably an inherited thought process, the likes of which will go back to a long-lost pre-Diluvian, pre-Ice Age civilization that the likes of Hancock and Carlson are talking about and championing extraordinarily well. Quite clearly, the ancient Egyptians didn't have the tools at their disposal to look into the molecular structure of anything, really. But I believe that they've inherited a mythology and a legend which fundamentally describes what someone somewhere in time before them had basically worked out and ingeniously incorporated it into the zeitgeist of future generations of humanity. And to think that the myth of Osiris is at least 5,000 years old and it's still with us today. I won't go into it now, but basically the myth of Osiris is remembered even today through the likes of The Lion King and Star Wars and just popular adaptations therein, just to make sure that maybe, I'm not saying that the director of The Lion King or indeed George Lucas had worked out the profundity of this riddle, but it's such a profound and significant mythology that they've used it intentionally or unintentionally to kind of keep the ball rolling, if you know what I mean. It's almost as if somebody somewhere has made a mythology hoping that someone somewhere in time, albeit here we are today, possibly picking at a stitch and let's say unraveling the myth for what it is. Again, for the benefit of future generations of humanity. It's such an in-depth hypothesis and such there's so many connotations and different, let's say, cultures across the globe that are remembering the same fundamental basis of the mythology, but in a way that their particular culture can understand and possibly remember it. And we can go back to, let's say, the Bible, for instance, as well, with regards to that being allegorical of human brain anatomy.
Let's put a pin in that, because what I'd love to do is to actually hear sort of what you would say is the overarching, agreed upon, common myth of Osiris, and then we can go through sort of different, how it appears, in the Bible, how it appears in, Aztec or Mayan culture, how it appeared in, somewhere else, Sumerian, whatever. I mean, you're the expert on it, and if you want to have a little fun, you can apply it to Tolkien or George Lucas or
nothing's off the table.
Yeah,
seriously, nothing's off the table. And again, with regards to Tolkien and Lucas, I think that again the same thesis and the same template has been used in order for us to carry the same mythology across. Should we not understand it today, that somebody somewhere down the line may in fact see the myth for what it is. But that said, I like to believe that maybe, just maybe,
let's start with the myth, and then let's work our way down to the secret knowledge that you think you've unlocked. But let's start with the myth, and then we'll work from there.
Sure. So the myth of Osiris, it basically starts at a banquet that has been hosted by Osiris's wicked evil brother called Seth, or Set, depending upon your sources. Right. Now, basically, everybody at the banquet was presented with a beautiful wooden coffin, or coffer, let's say. And the guests were all asked by Set to lay down inside the coffer, and they were told that whoever befitted it perfectly could in fact keep it. So guest after guest, they all try. They lie down inside the coffin, and they're either coming up too short, too wide, too small. Doesn't fit anybody particularly well until the turn of Osiris, and we find that it fits Osiris literally to the millimeter. It's perfect. It's made for him. But to the guests' stunned amazement, Seth and his men decide to seize the opportunity and basically nail it shut before carrying it away from the banquet and throwing the coffer with Osiris inside into the River Nile. Now, it floats around the River Nile for a number of days until it actually runs ashore on the coastal banks of Byblos in modern-day Lebanon, whereby it becomes further entangled within the roots and the trunk of a tamarisk tree. Now, Osiris's wife, Isis, she's looking for her lover, her ill-fated lover. Now, she gets wind that whereby the king of Byblos has now felled this beautiful tree and it basically become a pillar within his palace with Osiris inside it. And Isis gets wind of this and she bargains with the king of Byblos to set him free, which he does. So she extracts or takes Osiris from outside, from the confines of this acacia tamarisk tree, and Osiris basically impregnates his wife before Seth once again hears the news of this and decides to dispatch of Osiris once and for all, murder him, cut him up into a number of pieces, whereby Osiris then became remembered as the complete embodiment of all things acacia, hence the tamarisk tree that he was extracted from. But upon his, let's say, second murder at the hands of his wicked brother, he then became synonymous with the constellation of Orion, which, again, is almost an absurdity. The whole thing sounds like an absurdity. Nobody gets placed inside a coffin, then runs aground and a tree grows around it and gets rescued by their wife before impregnating her and then being chopped up again by their brother and being remembered as a celestial hunter of the heaven, a constellation. It makes no sense on the outset, you know?
Well, when you put it that way.
You know, well, Egyptologists still like to believe so at the moment. It's a throwaway myth, but take it at face value or not at all, they say. They don't really want to get their hands dirty with it, which is a shame. But that's where independent researchers like myself come into the equation, because again, it was where I had seen the molecular structure of DMT via the Spirit Molecule documentary from Rick Strassman that I thought, wow, that's the constellation of Orion. Now everything again hit me like that proverbial ton of bricks, thinking the myth of Osiris.
Can I guess?
But if the myth,
Can I venture a guess and see, and you tell me if I'm right or even close? So the connection, which, as you said, it makes no sense as to why this would happen, but the thing that might make it sense is that Osiris procreated with Isis, and through their offspring, the DNA in this genetic code lasted forever. So hunter, shooting arrows, not all that different from, well, the act of fornication. And maybe that's the connection, is the hunter...
It's a wonderful trail of thought. It's a wonderful trail of thought. And for all intended purposes, I'm sure that does have some substance to it. There's absolutely no doubt, because his son...
There's a butt coming. That's okay.
No, not at all. His son, the hawk-headed deity, and again, we're talking about anthropomorphic deities with animal heads. It makes no sense, you know, from a civilization that supposedly crafted the Colossus, that's the Great Pyramid, that we can't even reconstruct to a T ourselves today, to say that they were... not too savvy with regards to humanity and the nuts and bolts of what's going on, and actually worshipping animal-headed deities, it's almost childish, you know. It's like, come on, what's going on here? Who built the pyramids? Certainly not the guys that are drawing stick figures on tombs and claiming it for their own, you know. Makes no sense, unless somebody somewhere had constructed the original template for the likes of those monuments, and that they've basically been inherited by a civilization thereafter, being the ancient Egyptians. But just digressing again, with regards to the myth of Osiris, how could it be that Osiris should be remembered for eternity as the constellation of Orion, and also the complete embodiment of all things acacia, more specifically the lifeblood of the acacia? Now, the lifeblood of the acacia, we find, well, we can call it the sap of the acacia, is where we actually find extremely high potentials of extractable DMT. So what I'm bringing to the plank, to the ballpark, let's say, is that it's a mythological template for a macrocosmic rendering across the cosmos in the structure of Orion, which is actually, let's say, that macroscopic template for the microscopic structure of a godlike entheogenic compound that can be extracted from the acacia variety.
And it's a map to tell you how to get there if you know how to read the map as well. So it's
precisely,
it's got a dual purpose, and well, dualism is a big thing as well. So yeah, but yeah, I don't want to hijack your show.
No, not at all, not at all. It's everything you're saying ticks all the boxes. You know, it's, again, it can only come to fruition via a scientifically astute and adept society like we find ourselves today, you know. But again, the profundity of which is absolutely extraordinary. And I've had people claim as well, saying, well, maybe not, faces in clouds, pareidolia. Yeah, maybe you're reading too much into it. To which I now like to believe that I'm not reading. I don't think I will. I don't want to give too much away because I'm publishing another book soon as well. But there's a number of extremely watertight connotations that follow hand in hand and hand in glove, let's say, with regards to the original hypothesis. But what we also find is that the mythology of Osiris does in fact continue, because I've had people say to me, well, the constellation of Orion, the bottom half at least anyway, is more of a trapezium as opposed to a hexagonal structure of a benzene ring of the compound of DMT. And they'd be right in saying so. They are absolutely 100% right in saying so. And they've tried to say, well, because of that, I think you're rubbish. Okay, that's fine. But what I found out since writing The Spirit in the Sky, and it's actually within the conclusion of my last book, DMT, Pieties, Myth and Tryptamines, is that the myth of Osiris actually continues via a celebration which still continues in Egypt today in Abydos, known as the Mysteries of Abydos. Now, in the Mysteries of Abydos, Osiris is basically seen setting foot and taking sail of what's known as the cosmic barge, the Neshmet. Now, the cosmic barge in itself is another, let's say, clue or hint or shove in the right direction that we shouldn't actually be taking this literal, that he's actually setting foot on a boat or a barge on the Nile. It's a cosmic barge. Now, the ancient Egyptians recognized a star in the night sky as the Neshmet, the cosmic barge. We recognize this star today as Arneb, and Arneb, or the cosmic barge, the Neshmet, lies directly below the foot of Orion, or Osiris in the sky. Now, if let's endeavor to, let's say, join the proverbial dots in the sky and ask for Osiris to set foot upon the Neshmet, which would be Arneb, which is actually in the constellation directly below, known as Lepus. We know it today as Lepus, but the ancient Egyptians knew it as Wenet, the rabbit. But Osiris himself shared an alter ego, let's say, another deified, anthropomorphic celestial being, whereby Osiris was known as a rabbit-headed deity.
Oh.
Now, if we connect Osiris with the head of the rabbit, albeit the Neshmet, the cosmic barge, we then create the perfect hexagon for the DMT molecule, the benzene ring, which becomes an almost carbon copy in the sky of as above, so below. But we find that the free-base DMT itself actually binds to the serotonin receptor. So without serotonin, it's kind of defunct. It can't really do too much. But what we also find in the sky and within the constellation of Lepus, the rabbit's head, directly below the foot of Osiris, aboard the Neshmet, who the myth states that he sets foot on the Neshmet and crosses the Nile. Now, the next star in alignment within the constellation of Lepus, albeit Unefa or Wenet, there's a star named Nile. So connecting that last dot, let's say, in the sky, we actually create serotonin in the sky. Now, serotonin is produced via the pineal gland during daylight hours, and it gives the human experience the general feeling of well-being and joyfulness. Now, Nile, the way it's actually spelled, is actually spelled via, I think it's an Arabic stroke Sanskrit rendering, which is written Nihal, which actually is known as a child's name with connotations for joyfulness.
Okay, well, good.
So they're actually basically holding our hands in the sky saying, look at the myths, read into it, see what's above, join the proverbial knots in the sky and see what you find. And when you do find it, look into the myth further to find out where, in fact, we can find this particular neurotransmitter, and you'll find out the profundity of it therein. Because for all intents and purposes, Osiris was known as a god of resurrection, and free-base DMT practitioners will hold a very firm hand on their heart and tell you that for all intents and purposes, they died and were thus spiritually resurrected when they returned back to consensus reality. So the whole thing comes full circle regarding a god of resurrection, the god within, and the human experience, and what may eventually be thereafter. Because Osiris was also known as the gatekeeper of the duats, or the other world, which has biblical connotations to heaven or the thereafter, which again plays out 100% coming full circle with regards to gods of resurrection. It's the proverbial as above, so below, played out via mythology with allegorical context.
So heaven, not Eden, huh?
I'm sorry?
Heaven, not Eden.
Heaven.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so I follow that. I mean, literally, the sky has breadcrumbs to follow. You follow the trail, and then, like Hansel and Gretel, you get to the gingerbread house, but but there's not a witch in there. It's just a gingerbread house. It's delicious, and it's basically a roadmap for happiness. And the myth is telling you how to interpret that. Like you said, as above, so below. If you follow it and you understand the myth, then you're going to find your way to happiness, which, is rebirth, rebaptism, whatever you want, being saved. However, there's a million different ways in a million different cultures that people sort of describe a similar phenomenon. So, it's just accepting something different. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Beg your pardon, sorry. It does actually play out that there's a further deity that is synonymous with both constellations manifested, as Orion and Lepus, the entire rabbit, not just the head of the rabbit. Mm-hmm. And the connotations are this deified celestial being was known as Sa or Sahu, and Sahu was known as the hidden one and the incorruptible soul, which again plays down the DMT route with regards to rebirth and life thereafter and resurrection and the breakthrough experience. So the rabbit's head, albeit, the proverbial rabbit hole seems to deepen the further we go and the more we look into the mythology alongside a scientific lens, let's say.
Sounds a little bit like Enoch, incorruptible, and just one day walked with God and then was taken. Not died, taken, disappeared, hidden.
Yeah, and again, nothing's off the table. Again, if we'd have had this conversation, you'd have put something like that to me 10 years ago, I might have just smiled, wouldn't want to insult you, but again, after the conversation, I'd think, man, what's all that about? But now, nothing's off the table, man. If
we talked 10 years about it and I said Enoch, I would have been referring to the pale-skinned slee stack from Land of the Lost. And maybe I still am. Who knows? It's my secret. How is it that Osiris has been associated with Thoth, who some say is Thoth the Atlantean, but we know Thoth was a real figure in Egypt, or Thoth was part of a name. Like I've heard Thothmosis is the real Moses, but there was a Thoth who was a advisor to at least one pharaoh, and I think maybe the pharaoh who toyed with monotheism.
Again, with regards to, I don't want to say too much as well because Thoth is highlighted throughout my next publication.
Oh, okay.
And I don't want to, let's say, spill the beans.
Well, give us just the Creative Commons version, like the Cliff Note version of what most people know and how it's associated with Osiris, and then you can keep anything that's more detailed that's in your thesis out of it.
Well, Osiris himself is known as a god of resurrection, whereby Thoth would be the deified being that brought, let's say, civilizing skills and writing, and what's the best way to put it? The nuts and bolts of civilized society, if you know what I mean.
A social contract.
So with regards to Osiris being Thoth, I think there's something, without giving too much away, you've heard of the emerald tablets, and Osiris's skin is green. Nobody knows why. The nuts and bolts of which I will touch on very quickly. The etymology of Osiris, first of all, is extremely revealing. Os has a plethora of meanings, open being one, God being another, and iris is painstakingly obvious regarding the human eye.
Right.
Now, Osiris's son was a hawk-headed deity, and hawks are also known for their eyesight. Yeah. Now, if we look at brain anatomy once again, with regards to Osiris's son Horus, there's what's known as the vault of heaven. And now the vault of heaven looks, for all intended purposes, like a hawk sitting on a pillar. But the way the imagery is constructed in ancient Egypt, it shares so many commonalities with a rendering of the human brainstem. Once again, it absolutely beggars belief. But going back to Osiris's green skin and the conical headdress, which, a lot of the ancient Egyptian deities are quite baffling with regards to their anthropomorphic outlook. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but looking again through a scientific lens with regards to why Osiris's skin might be green and his conical headdress, regarding the etymology, albeit the eyes, iris, if we actually decide to break with the mainstream thought process once again and actually align a human photoreceptor of the human eye, which are also present within the pineal gland of the human brain, we find that a bust of Osiris next to a photoreceptor is nigh on identical. And the chief photoreceptor within the human eye and the pineal gland is green in colour and is shaped like a conical headdress, which is adorned by Osiris.
Wow. That's way too many coincidences.
And that's what I like to say in my books as well. How many coincidences do you need in order to sit up a little bit straighter and say, hold on, there's something going on here? You know, with regards to pareidolia, faces in clouds, that's fine. That's fine. I've hit a number of dead ends in my research before, and I'll hold my hands up. Not a problem. We've run into no man's land there. It's not going anywhere. But with regards to a thought process, with regards to Osiris being extracted from within the acacia, then becoming synonymous with the lifeblood of the sap of the acacia and the spirit of Osiris and the constellation of Orion in the sky, and his etymology is associated with the human eye, like I've just said, with regards to putting that side by side, that imagery of Osiris's bust, his green skin, his conical headdress next to a photoreceptor, which essentially shapes our reality. You know, it's through, again, it's biblical once again with regards to light, and God is all around us. You know, without light coming in through the iris, it has no idea how to make any sense of the incoming information that it makes and creates on an internal canvas at the back of your brain in order for us to actually understand consensus reality. You know, somebody somewhere knew this, worked it out, and as I say, they've inserted a number of mythological breadcrumbs, let's say, and you alluded to a treasure trail, which is wonderful. It's exactly what they've done. I mean, who's gonna, if today in the 21st century we work out the nuts and bolts of all the grey matter of the human brain anatomy, and we actually put that into a story should a cataclysm happen, when we're talking about things like the medulla oblongata, the pineal gland, the pituitary gland, the corpus callosum, it's very forgettable. No one's going to remember that. I'm not going to remember some of that, maybe next week if you told me, if you know what I mean. But if we stitch together a number of tales where we've got an iconic hero with metaphoric allusions to certain brain anatomy and its functionality, it's going to stand the test of time. And we know that because here we are in the 21st century, and we're trying to pick apart the myth of a riddle of Osiris, which is at least 5,000 years old, and it hasn't changed.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's been so many times in the show, I'm not going to bore the audience with going over them again, where we have seen where science and spirituality and, frankly, theologies no longer fight each other. They're actually one and the same in a lot of ways. And why not this, being one of those other spikes that doesn't go in different directions, but actually goes together to form its own pyramid or whatever a shaped multi-sided one would be, which is endless. So sort of like a spinning, like almost like a tetrahedron or half of one. I have two questions. One, so we've heard before, I'm sure you've encountered it more than you like, with the green skin of Osiris sort of being tied to reptilian, something evil, tied to the devil. Your interpretation is that's not that at all. It's representative with the emerald tablets, and it's nothing bad. It's more about, it's more life affirming.
Yeah, it's more of who we are and maybe what our potentiality could be as well. Because again, prior to having a DMT experience, and in all honesty, by the time I'd completed the first book, Spirit in the Sky, I hadn't actually had a DMT experience. I wasn't privy to the otherworldly, call it duat, call it a different interdimensional realm. I know that Strassman and the like talk about this DMT, air quote, realm being inhabited with extremely familiar and highly evolved, impossibly savvy and gifted and knowledgeable beings that are welcoming you back. To me, that just blew my mind. I thought, what are you talking about? I've got to get a t-shirt. If I'm going to talk the talk, I need to walk the walk, right?
Right.
And again, it's not something that I'm practicing every weekend, every month, every year, you know. It's a terrifying experience to go through on the outset with regards to, because DMT essentially tricks your brain into a death-like state. It's actually, for all intended purposes, saying, holy shit, we're dying. Okay, red alert, what's going on? You know? And when that happens, I mean, literally, my backside fell off. It was horrendous. It was horrific. And I didn't have that wingman that was talking about earlier on. There was no one there putting a nice reaffirming hand on my shoulder or my forehead saying, dude, everything's cool. You're breathing. Everything's fine. As far as I was concerned, my soul was being ripped out of my body, and my boy was going to find me dead on the balcony. It was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. But to find now as well, again, I can't talk too much because a lot of the nuts and bolts of this are going to be in my next publication. But to find that there are trains of thought across the globe, independent of each other, which I tend to believe is now a unified shared cosmology from a Graham Hancock-esque lost civilization that once understood this stuff. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that you have to extract this stuff from nature itself and have an ayahuasca experience or a free-based DMT experience. I'm tending to believe that there are ways to achieve this godlike, entheogenic, resurrecting, rebirth experience via certain trains of thought, albeit meditation, which sounds maybe a little bit absurd, but a lot of this stuff that I was researching sounded absurd in the outset. I'm trying to tiptoe around what my next publication is going to be about, putting too much out into the ether. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's off the table. I don't genuinely think that. I don't think that 99.9% recurring of humanity is actually living up to their own spiritual potential, let's say, with regards to the biological functionality of the supercomputer between our brains and how to actually use it and maximize it.
Yeah, well, it's been proven we use a very small percentage of our brain, you know, on a daily basis. How much is, I guess, a subject of disagreement. Actually, without giving away anything on your book at all, and actually going back to Osiris, can you give us like 4 or 5 examples of the Osiris myth where it's been seen in other myths or theologies, and just give, I don't know, like the 30-second version on each of how they parallel the Osiris myth, and you can start with the Bible if you like, because that's probably the easiest.
Sure. Well, the go-to, I guess, God's Son, the resurrected, deified. Again, I don't want to. It's not my job to insult or offend anyone.
Sure.
But again, I think that the Jesus story is another mythology. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a very savvy, forward-thinking gentleman back in the day that maybe, a certain trail of thought ran away with, let's say. But the upshot of it being that this resurrected. God of resurrection that's synonymous with light, and we know how light interacts with the eyes and X, Y, Z. Again, I think it's inherited. Again, you've even touched on the likes of Mithra. It's the same person. Zeus, lightning. It's the same connotation. And again, they're all independent trails of thought from different parts of the world, essentially. But they're all stitched together in a manner to which the society at the time can adhere to and understand and recognize and remember as well, because that's the most important thing as well in order for us to actually get to the nuts and bolts of what's going on. It was nigh on impossible to understand this stuff even sort of 500-600 years ago.
Is there an equivalent sort of in some place that people might not think about, like a Mesoamerican myth, something in Asia, maybe one of the Indian subcontinent myths? Are there any like myths that people might have heard of a little bit, but haven't put it together or aren't familiar with it all.
Okay, right. So, right. The nuts and bolts of, I keep saying nuts and bolts, that's my go-to catchphrase this evening, isn't it, quite clearly? There's Japanese mythology, cool. There's South American, Mesoamerican mythology, there's also a North American mythology, there's, there's an Australasian mythology, there's a Japanese mythology, which are all, again, I'm being very selective and shady, I guess, with regards to not letting the cat out of the bag. But let's say the one that people are most familiar with would probably be the story of the likes of Odin, a Norse mythology, and yeah, their mythological tree of life, and the roots of which are certainly suggestive of Horus losing an eye with regards to his daily battle with Seth, and everything kind of goes hand in hand, you know.
And ravens with eyesight.
Yeah. Again, I'm skirting around this rather loosely, but I'm absolutely chomping at the bit. I mean, if once this next publication's out, I'd love to hit you up and do another podcast and really
sold. No problem.
Because it would be amazing.
Offer accepted.
No, fantastic. That's fantastic. Because as I say, I genuinely believe that what I'm bringing to the table, especially in this next work as well, with what I've put out there already, I think is so obvious. It's just a matter of time until not just someone else, until the world and his wife understand it and go, dude, makes sense. I get it. Now the myth of Osiris sheds light on the myth of XYZ, albeit XYZ, albeit XYZ.
Right.
Where are we going with this?
Without giving away anything, like, just give us the names of the principal gods or heroes, like you said, Odin. So, for instance, and this may be way off, I don't know, but like, say, Quetzalcoatl, or say, Enki. I don't know who does what, but who would be the other corresponding god stories that people can look into a little bit themselves, and then follow up with your next book.
No, sure. Again, the likes of Quetzalcoatl, Kukulkan. And my girlfriend said to me, whatever you say, don't say the word butcher, but I am going to butcher this one. There's a number of Japanese deities, namely, and here it goes, my very bad pronunciation.
It's okay.
Kunato Kana Tatasushi, which is something for someone else's crosswords. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, just throwing that out in the ether. But they all hold far too many commonalities again for it all to be coincidental. And what I'm getting at as well with regards to my next book that's coming out as well, and a lot of people will probably be nodding through their headsets listening to this as well, is the construction technology that we see repeated the globe over with regards to the nubs that we find that we're scratching our heads at, thinking, what is this stuff? Why are we seeing polygonal constructions in Easter Island and in Sicily and in Japan and in Mesoamerica, in the Middle East, yet all these guys were...
in Wisconsin.
They're everywhere. I mean, you literally, you can almost throw a dart, a map on a board now, and you're going to find something there that is corresponding 110% watertight, along with a plethora of other mind-blowing constructions the world over. And for us to say that these independent cultures, separated by time and distance, have nothing in common, it's an absolute absurdity. Clearly, a lot of this stuff was inherited from an epoch forgotten a long time ago.
Well, I think that you are absolutely the right guy to ask this next question of. I hope I don't set you up for failure here, but I think it's probably impossible. The Seven Sisters are important everywhere. And listen, until recently, even though I've been doing this show for almost 2 years now, I thought the Seven Sisters was the Orion constellation, and obviously I've learned that it's not. So what is so universal about the Seven Sisters, and does this play into your research?
It does, and I'm going to be extremely vague once again. I presume we're talking about the, or part of the constellation of the Pleiades, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think so anyway. I mean, that's my understanding, but obviously my understanding is evolving. Let's just say that.
Okay, so the Pleiades, to find the Pleiades, if you actually look at, for those that don't know, if you look at the constellation of Orion and Orion's belt, the 1, 2, 3 stars, which is now world famed for being synonymous with the Giza Plateau as well. That actually points literally, like a finger towards the shoulder of the bull, which Orion, or albeit Osiris, is actually, let's say, in battle with. Them 3 stars, again, I'm going to be extremely vague again. Your listeners are going to be thinking, dude, just spit it out. But the 3 sisters.
Listen, they should just be happy that I don't go segue with the bull and ball and all of that. So just folks, don't be happy I'm doing that. But at some point, I'm going to do a Canaanite show if I can find someone who's willing to talk about it.
Well, everything goes hand in hand and hand in glove once again with regards to that particular constellation and the constellation of Orion. And again, without giving my game away for my next publication, the Acacia as well. And a particular Middle Eastern deity, or deities, I should say. It's a trio of deities that are responsible for being synonymous with the belt stars of Orion that come out of Muslim religion that are known as Al-Uza. And Al-Uza has a couple of sisters, one side by side, and I will mess their names up as well, so I won't wax lyrical and pretend that I'm au fait with their pronunciation at the moment. But the long and short of it is that these 3 sisters within the hub of the Orion constellation are also synonymous with the acacia tree.
Oh, wow. And the Pleiades is because it points to the bull. Is that just the connection between the two? Is between the bull and the hunter? Is that the magic? Is that what makes them so important?
Well, either side. Okay, so Osiris is in the middle. Let's say we've got 3 constellations. Okay, we've got Osiris in the middle. We've got Isis, who is synonymous with the Canis Major's brightest star, the brightest star in the night sky at the moment, Sirius Major. And on the other side of that, we've got the bull. Now, we've got Isis being Omega and the bull being Alpha.
Okay.
And somewhere in the middle, there's there's a pun here somewhere. There's a bullseye, but I don't want to say too much again until I'm fully published. But again, I can't wait to stand on my soapbox and just really shout this stuff as loud as I can, because it's extremely significant. And you're right on the money, pointing that particular constellation out as well, for reasons that may or may not, but most definitely will become a lot more obvious over the coming months when I get this next publication.
Don't give me too much credit. I just can't I can't avoid bumping into it. I just don't understand why people pick these particular 7 stars that are in a line. Because again, if you look at the sky, you could sort of pick any 7 stars that are in a line, and there's got to be something. So again, without going into any new information that you're about to publish, what is sort of the I'll keep calling the Creative Commons general, hive thought as to what is the significance of the 7 sisters or the Pleiades?
Yeah, again, it's not. I can't. I'd rather not answer that at the moment, if that's okay.
Okay.
I'm sure if you tweak that proverbial telescope into your own research a little bit tighter, something will most definitely come into focus regarding the conversation that we've had about Osiris, DMT therein as well. Again, I don't want to give the game away, but it started in the obvious, once you know where to look, and you're obviously looking in the right direction.
Well, the funny thing is, I'm not a researcher, at least only in the loosest sense of the term. I had this conversation with someone earlier in the week. They said, you know, don't fall for this. It's talking about something entirely different. It's going to lead your research astray. I'm like, I'm not a researcher except in the loosest term. I'm just a podcaster. I talk to researchers, and I talk to enough of them that I learn, but believe me, I forget about it. I forget as much as I learn. Anyway, nobody out there needs to hear this because they already know it.
The right information anyway to ask the right questions. Of that, I can absolutely tip my hat. There's no problem there whatsoever. I mean, I was talking about the Alpha and Omega, either side corresponding alongside Osiris in the middle. But with regards to Isis in the middle, in the night sky, and Sirius, are you familiar with the? Oh, well, I guess that modern day nomadic tribe, an ancient Western African nomadic tribe known as the Dogon.
Sure, yeah. We covered the Dogon origin myth, I think it was episode 52 with my guest PJ Black, which is important to me because PJ Black is a professional wrestler who was in WWE for 5 years under the name of Justin Gabriel. So I thought it was pretty cool, but he's South African and he's studying Gematria right now. And I don't know, he's just really interesting. But yes, we absolutely covered the Dogon and the Zulu tribe myth. But also I recently read, and by read I mean listened to, the audiobook by Tyson Yunkaporta, who's a Aboriginal. I'm just going to call him a philosopher, but I'll call him philosopher/genius because he also talks about quantum mechanics and just, I don't know, I can only scratch the scratch of his stuff. But the Pleiades are important in Aboriginal stories as well. So it's universal, and that just and listen, I appreciate you don't want to go into it because it ties into sort of spoilers for your book, and you don't want to do that.
Sure.
And listen, I'll find out the answer through someone else because I'm too lazy to research it. That's why I have my show. But I'll find out the answer. That's fine. But we're on the trail. It's important, but we're not going to get that answer today. But fear not, audience. We will get it. And by the time the show is over, you'll have probably heard it 7 times. Once for each sister. I have a question for you, which is, listen, if for folks that aren't familiar with Graham Hancock, you probably should be, but you can recognize, even if you don't subscribe to some thought, that there are giants in every industry. So you may not believe in Catholicism, but you understand that the Pope is a giant in the world of Catholics. You may not like Elon Musk, but you recognize he's a giant in that industry. You may not like Donald Trump, but in Donald Trump world, he's the giant. So and let's try and do something more positive. I'm going to stop now. But anything. Walt Disney is a giant in entertainment. Stan Lee is a giant in comics. Whatever it is. Graham Hancock is a giant, and somehow you got his attention and got on his, not just on his radar, but you're actually on his site, on grahamhancock.com. You were prominently featured there. So how'd that happen? How did that connection evolve?
In all honesty, I almost beat his door down. No, with all due respect, I tried to contact him. I said, look, I think, again, going to that proverbial piece of the puzzle in prehistory, I said, I think I've got something here that holds a lot of weight. And a lot of his books talk about prehistory. A lot of his books talk about a lost civilization and an impending cataclysm, which probably ended something that was in order for what was left to rebuild. But what he also writes about, which was on my radar as well, which he's just released an audio version of actually as well. I think he's retitled it Visionary.
I think you're right.
I've got it here somewhere. Supernatural. Supernatural is about entheogenic compounds, namely ayahuasca and DMT. And I've got a lot of people that have inspired my train of thought and my writing. But with regards to what Graham himself has brought to the table, what that puzzle piece again, which I think fits into a pretty darn beautiful looking picture, I just felt that he had to be privy to what I'd found. I was lucky enough that he responded to me via a social media platform, And to get his attention, I basically, just kind of shot him a couple of images that, instead of having to read all the, I guess, the boring story that gets you from ABC through to XYZ, the imagery itself, I like to think, kind of slaps you in the face straight away and makes you go, Jesus, what's this about?
Well, it must have been, because he gets solicitations and contacts all the time, I'm sure, for people who have, I'm sure they're all bright, intelligent, and have interesting stuff, but, and not to diminish any of the work of any of these people, but, you can read Eric Von Daniken, Nick Redfern, and Andrew Collins, and, except for things that are really recent, it's largely the same. So, I mean, so he probably got stuff. Okay, well, that's great. I agree. Interesting, but it's not new. Obviously, you showed him something new.
Yeah, and I'm extremely thankful for him actually, creating the time to publish my research and a couple of articles on his website. In fact, The Spirit in the Sky, the first book, I was lucky enough to be given the what do you call it? It's not not a title, but I was awarded, let's say, the author of the month.
The book club recommendation. You got the Graham Hancock, the Oprah Book Club of the month, but the Hancock author of the month.
There we go, and that was lovely, because I spent a month interacting with people that frequent the website, that actually sign up to it, and I learned a lot, and I like to think that I gave a lot of people information and food for thought as well. And on the whole, it was genuinely really quite, not really, but very well received. It was a breath of fresh air for a lot of people.
Probably for you also.
I'm extremely thankful.
I mean, because you probably get met with a lot of sort of faces as just like, what the hell's this guy talking about? So it was probably great validation for you. Just the people were taking this and absorbing it.
Oh, indeed. Some of the hardest things for me to do. I mean, writing they're relatively small books that I'm writing, and that's only because of publishing purposes and the cost of publishing. Because there's almost every other page is full with color imagery in order to actually get the thought process across, because a picture paints 1,000 words, and if I can cut 1,000 words out of a book and literally give them that picture, it tends to do a lot of the writing for me, let's say. But the hardest thing for me to do is actually write a synopsis. The back of the book is the hardest thing in the world, because I'm talking about mythology. I'm talking about a lost civilization. I'm talking about psychedelic compounds. I'm talking about brain anatomy. I'm talking about ancient scripture, and I need to kind of condense everything into like 2 punchy paragraphs in a nutshell, without exposing the eye-opening or third eye-opening conclusion, let's say, as a hook for people to potentially buy the book and come on the ride and learn with me, really. And it's been wonderful, because the people that have left the reviews have contacted me personally as well, after leaving their reviews on Amazon, and they've inspired me no end. It's been, without them, it's been absolutely wonderful. I mean, on the outset, when I wrote The Spirit in the Sky, Ancient Cosmological Gods and Where in the World We Find Them, I was bold enough to state on the website that this little book has the potential to change the world, which I genuinely think it does. But if it changes one person's world, that's a world that's been changed, if it changes for the better, So for me, it's, I'm aglow and I'm warm inside that I'm actually reaching people with a message that can be understood, that everyone, that means so much to everyone. It's just not just my story. This is a story about humanity. And it ties in as a chapter, let's say, alongside the giants of the game, like Hancock himself. And I'd like to think, if I don't get to the bottom of this, that somebody somewhere in the future is going to pick this up and run away with the rest of it, and actually find out what this life's about with regards to human consciousness, because quite honestly, no one's got a clue.
Well, congratulations on that achievement, getting there. I mean, it's sort of like it's like almost like being invited to be a law clerk for a Supreme Court justice or something. You know, it's great. Tell the folks where they can buy your stuff, where they can find you, how they can follow you, where they can support you.
Indeed, thank you. My books are only available via Amazon, which is a shame at the moment. I'm looking to get that changed. All you have to do is basically, type in my name, RN Vooght, VOOGHT. And yeah, the first 3 books and potentially the 4th in the coming months will be on there to buy. You can find me on most media platforms, just the same kind of search, either RN Vooght or Vooght RN for Twitter, let's say. And I've actually started only about 2 months ago as well, my own little YouTube channel to try and actually build a number of videos. Some are 1.5 minutes long, some are 10 minutes long. So enough to hold your attention, but enough to kind of blow your mind emojis, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I do.
So yeah, if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please come along, subscribe, follow, and jump on board, because it's a destination unknown at the moment, and it's going to be a fast, fun ride. So yeah, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Do you have when I saw the title of your book, I was thinking that the outro song would be "Spirit in the Sky," but that doesn't really fit. That's all about Jesus. Nothing wrong with Jesus, but that doesn't really fit this. And then you've recently mentioned 2 other titles, which could possibly, like Destination Unknown by Missing Persons. That's a possible outro. But also, If You Could Change the World by Eric Clapton. That could also fit too. But I'm wondering if there's some song, something about Osiris or something about the stars that you would request as your outro. I'm happy to take requests on that. Otherwise, you have to trust me to find something and go, that feels right.
Well, I tell you what, my go-to artist at the moment is, believe it or not, he's a country singer in America known as Have you heard of Sturgill Simpson?
No, I have not.
Well, he's absolutely changed he's changed my thought process with regards to country music. Absolutely astounding. If you look up a couple of tracks, one called Just Let Go, which is about the DMT experience, and Turtles All the Way Down, which talks about, just skirting around the edge of it, Turtles All the Way Down is an ancient cosmology about what the nuts and bolts of the cosmos and reality really is.
I'm all in. Sturgill.
He's associating everything alongside DMT as well. So if you sit and take note and listen to the lyrics there.
Sturgill, what's the last name? I'm sorry.
Sorry?
Sturgill what?
Sturgill Simpson.
Sturgill Simpson. Deal. It'll be one of those songs. Probably the turtle one, unless the other one just sounds a lot better, because I'm all about the turtles. So very cool. All right, folks, you know where you can follow and support RN Vooght. Please do follow him, buy his books, check out the stuff. And by the way, if you want to hear the Graham Hancock recently about the book that I think he reissued it. I think it was called Visionary, renamed it Supernatural. He's been on Earth Ancients within the last 2 months. Again, this is May 8th, 2022. So it was probably April 2022, maybe in the latter part of March. So check that out. I've never been afraid to support other shows, especially one. I will never catch up with Earth Ancients. So it's not like I'm competition. So, but still, I would support them anyway, because Cliff's been on the show, and I listen to the show every single week. But if you're interested in hearing, it's probably a good introduction into both Graham Hancock and to Rick's work here. So, folks, thanks so much for tuning in. Hopefully you will let your friends know, share, rate, review, give us 5 stars, give us a review. Do the same for Rick while you're at it. And I want to thank the folks at the PWC for powering us. I want to thank the Wrestling Soup Network for allowing this show, which has 0 to do with wrestling, to be on your network, and my sister show, Garden Views, which has even less to do with wrestling, on there. So thanks to all those folks, and thanks to the supporters of the show and the friends. You can follow me at Evil Dose at Garden of Doom, or Icarus Fell MD. Well, at Icarus Fell MD at Twitter. I really have no preference which you follow me on that. And Garden of Doom has its own Facebook page, not a group, but if you send something there, chances are I will respond, even if you tell me how much you hate me. That's fine too.
You do yourself an injustice, pal. Seriously, thank you. Everyone should follow you as well. Seriously, Jeff, it's been an amazing experience. It's been fun to catch up. So, yeah,
Thank
well
you,
done.
sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you're welcome back anytime. When your book is ready, please feel free to reach out. But even before that, if you want to talk about other stuff that has nothing to do with your book, and if you just want to talk about mythology around the world and tie it to cosmology, or just the mythology, forget the cosmology. Whatever your secret sauce is, you can leave it up. Because I have a feeling you have a lot of fun information in that head of yours that wouldn't tease out the new book. Maybe it would tease out stuff from the old books, but who knows? Whatever.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Anyway, open invitation. Thank you again so much. And folks, we will hear from you next week. All right, I've stopped the recording on Adobe, so don't worry about what's going on Skype.
It was, a really, really nice, free-flowing, fun conversation. And considering this is the second podcast I've been able to do in the past couple of years, because I somewhat recently became a full-time daddy.
Oh, congratulations.
That's where my focus and soul and attention of it has obviously been. But no, it's nice to get the proverbial ring rust off and have a wonderful conversation with someone just as inspired as myself. So thank you very much. It's been really good, Jeff. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. That's a great compliment. I love it when the guests who have been researchers and studying something, don't see through my veneer of the lack of depth of my knowledge. So I know just enough to be dangerous with things, which is why I love having knowledgeable guests on. And it's,
Great questions. Yeah. Seriously, great questions. You had them all stacked up and it was brilliant. And as I say, as a researcher, and going into a podcast, you never know what you're going to get asked. Some things you can't answer. That's just the way it goes. But no, you asked all the right things, and I think it's made for a great show, and I look forward to promoting it with you. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, it's probably going to drop within the next 3 weeks, whether it's next week or 2 weeks, I don't know, but within the next 3 weeks, because I always have extra shows.
Fantastic.